I used to think horror stories were just that, stories, until something started watching me every single night. I don't know what it is or where it came from, but every night around 3 a.m., it's there, staring. It all started a few months ago. I'd recently moved into this small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just cheap and quiet, which was perfect for me. I liked the quiet. But then things started shifting. I remember the first night like it was yesterday. I'd woken up around 3 a.m., parched, so I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. As I was heading back to my room, I glanced out the window that overlooks the alley below. And that's when I saw it, a shadow, standing perfectly still across the street, just staring up at my window. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or maybe some insomniac neighbor just taking a stroll. But this thing, it wasn't moving, just standing there, as if it was watching me. A shiver ran down my spine, but I shrugged it off, figuring it was just a weird one-off. The next night, though, it happened again and again. Every night, without fail, I'd wake up around 3 a.m. and feel this strange pull to look out the window. And every night, the shadow was there, in the exact same spot, staring up at me. It got worse when I started noticing details. Like, I could swear it had eyes, glowing faintly, like two red coals in the darkness. And as days went by, it seemed like those eyes got brighter, or closer. I'm not really sure which. But something about it kept drawing me back to that window. It was almost like it wanted me to see it. I tried talking to my friend Mark about it. He's the practical type, always rolling his eyes at anything remotely supernatural. When I told him, he just laughed it off, saying I was probably just dreaming. He even suggested I take a picture of the shadow if I was so sure it was real. So that night, when I woke up, I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture, and went back to bed, thinking that would prove I was just seeing things. But the next morning, when I checked my phone, the picture was blank, just pitch black, like I'd taken it with the lens covered. I know my room wasn't that dark, and there should have at least been a faint outline of the streetlight outside, but there was nothing, just a void. By this point, I was getting more than a little freaked out. Every night, it was the same thing. I'd wake up at 3 and there it would be, staring up at me. Only now, it felt closer. Like it was slowly making its way toward me, night by night, inch by inch. After a few weeks of this, I decided enough was enough. I closed my blinds, figuring if I couldn't see it, it couldn't bother me, right? Wrong. That very night I felt it. I was lying in bed, blinds closed, lights off, and I'd almost convinced myself that tonight would be the first peaceful night in weeks. Then I felt a shift in the room, the kind of shift where you just know you're not alone. My skin prickled, and I forced myself to keep my eyes shut, but that sense of being watched, it was stronger than ever. Then I heard it, soft, like a whisper, but wrong, like it wasn't made for human ears. I see you. My eyes snapped open, but my room was pitch dark. The sound came from the corner, near the door. I swear I could see something there, a shape darker than the darkness around it, and it was moving, closer. I didn't even think. I bolted out of bed, ran to the door, and practically threw myself down the hall and out of my apartment. I spent the night at Mark's, who didn't look too thrilled to see me pounding on his door at 3:15 a.m. But he didn't argue. He let me crash on his couch, and I didn't sleep a wink. The next day, I tried explaining to Mark what had happened. He still didn't buy it, but he agreed to come back with me to check out my apartment. When we got there, everything seemed fine, normal, like nothing had ever happened. but I couldn't shake that feeling that something was wrong. I didn't want to stay there alone again, so I kept going to Mark's every night. After a week, I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it really was just sleep deprivation playing tricks on me. So I decided to stay at my apartment again, and for the first night in weeks, I slept peacefully. No waking up at 3 a.m., no feeling of being watched. But then, it came back. This time I didn't even have to get out of bed to know it was there. I could feel it, the weight of its gaze pressing down on me like a physical force. I tried to ignore it, burying myself under my blanket, but that whisper came back, closer than before, like it was right by my ear. I see you. I can't explain what I felt in that moment. Terror, yes, but also something deeper. A feeling that whatever this thing was, it wasn't going away. Not ever. I left my apartment that night and never went back. I ended my lease, threw out everything I owned, and moved across the city. It's been months now, and for a while, I thought maybe I'd finally escaped it. But a few nights ago, I woke up at 3 a.m., out of habit. My new apartment has a window that looks out over the street, and there, in the distance, barely visible in the dim light, I saw it, that shadow, watching, and I know, somehow, it's getting closer again. I froze, staring at the window, trying to convince myself I was just imagining things. But there it was, darker than the night, just standing there, waiting. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure it would hear me. I pulled the covers up, trying to block out the thought of it standing out there, watching. I must have stayed like that for hours, too scared to even move, until the first light of dawn crept in. The next night, I didn't want to look out the window, but something made me. I had to know if it was still there. I braced myself and glanced outside, praying it was gone. But it wasn't. It was closer this time, right on the sidewalk across the street, those faint red eyes fixed on my window. I tried to rationalize it, to think of some logical explanation, but it was like my brain refused to connect the dots. I started avoiding my own home, spending most of my time anywhere else, going to work early, staying late, crashing at friends' places whenever I could. But eventually, I had to come back, had to sleep there, even if just for a few hours. One night, I got back around midnight, and it wasn't there. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. I crawled into bed, trying to ignore the cold dread creeping up my spine. But right around 3 a.m., I felt it. The hairs on my arms stood up, and an icy chill settled in the room. This time, I didn't look outside. I couldn't, but I didn't need to because I heard it. A slow, deliberate tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I squeezed my eyes shut, holding my breath, hoping it would stop. But the tapping only got louder, more insistent. I finally gave in and opened my eyes, heart hammering. There, pressed against my window, was the shadow. Only now I could see more than just its eyes. A faint outline, like a figure shrouded in darkness, features that seemed almost human, but wrong. Its hand, if that's what it was pressed against the glass, long, bony fingers tapping in a slow, rhythmic pattern. It didn't move, just stared, as if it was studying me, enjoying my terror. My mouth went dry and I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but sit there. But I was paralyzed, trapped by its gaze. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. One moment it was there, and the next, just an empty window. My reflection staring back at me. I don't know how I managed it, but I scrambled out of bed, grabbed whatever I could carry, and left that apartment for good. I didn't care about my lease, my belongings, nothing. I just wanted to get as far away as possible. Since then, I've moved 3 times. Each time I think maybe it'll be over, that I can finally sleep through the night without waking up to that horrible feeling of being watched. But it always finds me. I've tried therapy, tried talking to priests, even tried moving across the country, but it doesn't matter. Every few nights, I wake up at 3 a.m., and there it is, outside my window, just a little closer than before. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. It's like this thing is patient, like it's waiting for something. And every night when I wake up and see it again, that horrible whisper echoes in my head. I see you. And I'm starting to think that someday soon, it's going to be a lot more than just a shadow at my window. After that last night, I knew I couldn't keep running. I decided to face it, to see if confronting it would end this nightmare. So I stayed up, sitting in a chair by the window, my heart pounding as I watched the minutes crawl toward 3 a.m. When the clock struck, a chill swept through the room, and I knew it was there. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to the window, and there it was, closer than it had ever been, standing right outside my window. Its dark form was clearer now, and its red eyes seemed almost pleased. I forced myself to hold its gaze, refusing to let my fear take control. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice shaking. But it didn't answer. Instead, it lifted one long, bony finger and tapped on the glass 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The tapping echoed in my mind, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something was shifting inside me. That's when I realized this thing wasn't just watching me. It was feeding on me, slowly breaking down my spirit, drawing closer every time I let fear rule me. And then, for the first time, it spoke. "I'm waiting." My heart raced, waiting for what? But deep down I understood. It was waiting for me to surrender, to lose hope, to let fear take over completely. In that moment, I knew that if I kept running, it would keep getting closer, feeding off my terror until there was nothing left of me. With the last bit of strength I had, I whispered, "You won't have me." And as if those words held some power, the figure faded, slowly dissolving into the night. Since that night, it hasn't returned. The tapping has stopped, and I can sleep again. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the morning, I still feel that chill, like a reminder that it's out there waiting. And I know that if I ever let fear consume me again, it'll be back, just a little closer than before, ready to claim what it's been waiting for all along.